Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Martial Praxis. This time I'm joined by Phil Carson. He's a amazing fencing coach who's really been spearheading introducing the constraint-led approach and ecological dynamics into the fencing world. And he's recently written a new book, and I'm really excited to have him on the podcast. So thanks for coming on, and really excited to pick your brain.
Thank you so much for having me on. Delighted. First podcast I've done since finishing the book, which was quite a quite a traumatic experience in lots of ways. When you put your heart and soul in writing and you put it out there for other people to read, so it was yeah, I was sweating when I pressed the go button, but we have go, and here we are.
What was that experience like? Because I go through this kind of on a daily basis with my students, with the parents of my students, because this is something that's new with the constraints-led approach. Despite what a lot of people like to say that this has always existed, I kind of feel strongly that it hasn't. There is some new stuff here. It's a new way of doing it. But have you experienced like a lot of pushback in fencing specifically?
Yeah, huge amount of pushback. Um, so I was working in London for coaching there for about 20 years. Then I went off to Australia for my dream job. And my wife then got her dream job in Scotland. So we
Oof.
found ourselves, I'm Scottish myself, but we ended up back in Scotland. And, I'd been, traditionally trained. I knew all the moves inside out. I got diplomas in our three main disciplines, foil, épée, sabre. I'm a full master of British Academy of Fencing. All sounds great. And things were ticking along nicely. But the national governing body said to me, we'd like you to take on coach education.
Mm,
Okay, so this is quite important because I've come at this slightly different. So I'm not kind of one of these journeyman coaches who've kind of fallen into it. And the brief for me was, we're not doing very well in the UK compared with other nations. Have a look at what is world-class coaching.
mm.
And at that point, I did a couple of short courses in Glasgow University in psychology. I did a course with Barcelona Football Club. They have a university within their world, and started reading and slowly started picking up on games-based ideas, game sense, getting into more ecological ideas. And these ideas just hit me between the eyes. These for years I've been in serious conflict in my own practice because I could teach things perfectly, but they just weren't translating, they weren't transferring
Mm.
in
Yes.
the performance. And you go through all that. Well, it's the kids aren't as talented as other people, or we don't have the culture, we don't have the facilities. You get all that negativity that comes around it.
Yeah.
But when you get
Excuses,
into
right?
the
Like,
yeah, yeah, it sound familiar?
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, and actually, it's when you start looking at the environment itself and how we're creating that, and how are the kids being allowed to connect with the game and connect in their own way. So we started, and I said, I took a strong view in this. I thought, well, if I'm going to take on this coach education thing, and I said no to start with, to be honest. And there's just something about the two people who were running the national governing body. I wanted to work for them. They were good guys. I knew they wanted to do the right thing. But it's fencing is steeped in hundreds of years of a particular way of doing things, a particular very fixed language, a particular order. And you talk to 90% of coaches in the UK about taking a non-technique first approach, and they'll look at you like you're crazy. They'll
Yeah.
go, that's not actually possible.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we made a few mistakes early on. This was 2018. We made a few mistakes early on by trying to put some of the theory up front.
Hmm.
But when you think about it, on any coaching situation, any coach education that I've ever been on, you don't get loads of, well, you might, I don't know, but you don't get PowerPoint slides up front saying, we're basing the training today on Euclidean geometry and
Yeah,
Newtonian. You don't get this,
totally.
you know.
Yeah, even though
But
those
that
things often do underpin the theories that, yeah, you're not gonna, yeah,
exactly. But we've got ourselves into a little bit of a problem in some ways because that stuff's not really necessary. But people
yeah,
have just forgotten what we based our training systems on. They've completely forgotten. You ask the question, and again, they look at you slightly offended, and then they look at you again thinking that you are particularly crazy because we've just always done it this way. So when you start looking at it from that perspective, what we did was we said, well, okay, let's not worry too much about the theory, but let's have theory informed practices for the coaches to come in and engage with.
yeah.
It's yeah. So
Yeah, like
that
you
was
lead
kind
with the thing. Like let's have them
yeah.
do it.
Let's set up a live situation, scaled right down. Let's scaled right back to where they're at, and let's play and let's see where this goes. And we ran into a very small bit early on, which was we realized quite quickly that the coaches who were coming on the courses had always been they'd always come on for certification. They were told what the syllabus is. They were shown the syllabus. They
Yeah,
practiced the syllabus until it could be done the way it had always been done.
yeah.
And then it's kind of like parole. You get released back into society, certified that you're not going to cause any damage or any danger anywhere. You know, it's
Yes.
kind of that. It's a very closed, but it ties the whole system up in that old way of doing things. So
And you
we
also
had a
feel like with the parole example, it's kind of like there's not that much relationship between what they're being taught when they're in and when they go back out, they're kind of just left to their own devices. They sort of do whatever.
well, I think it got a little bit worse than that over the last
Mm,
50 years. And it's well documented in the UK because what was happening was I was taught to fence in that technique first way. And
yeah.
I got within an environment where everyone's taught that way. Some people will rise to the top, some people won't. It's fine.
Talent graveyard, yeah.
And so then I go into, when I'm an adult and my kids come along and they want to do some fencing. So I go, well, I better get myself qualified. So I go off and I am taught how to teach the system faithfully
Yeah.
according to how we've always done it. But that's been going on now for so many generations that
It's
it's
like
just so the
telephone.
kids, yeah. And so the kids I was teaching 25 years ago got into coach in the same way. So it just perpetuates the system.
So it gets
The
very
language,
stylized. Like we're not actually engaging with the real field of affordances. We're just sort of pigeonholing what we're doing into prearranged sequences.
absolutely. But just to track back before we get into the
Yeah.
affordances side of things, what we found was that the coaches were coming on expecting to be told what to do it and be certified that they could do it in a kind of competency-based way. So we had to go through this little adjustment early on. It worked very well, which is when coaches come onto our courses now, we go through a little bit of learning how to learn.
Mm,
So we introduce them very, very gently to well scaled back live situations where they can play their part. So if we're attacking defenses, that's the lesson plan. They will learn how to defend authentically, but
yeah.
at scale, and we'll build up from here. Then we'll get them to go through a little bit of reflective practice. They will work out, well, what was I actually working on there? What went well? Take feedback from the other coaches, any of the kids that are in. We're going to do it again. What will you do even better? Great. That's your action plan. So
Yeah.
this flips it from a very, here's the technique, do it this way. No, not like that, like this. Put your thumb on top here. Make sure your balance is like this. And we turn it so that all of that ecological information is now fully included in the practice. And
Mm,
that's what they're reflecting on.
yeah.
Because when
Yeah.
you do that technique by technique and mechanical positional type play, there's no need for ecological information. There's no need to perceive distance. There's
Yeah.
no need to have a feeling for timing, to understand the conversation you're having with gravity and where your opponent's at. You don't need to feel momentum. You don't need to worry
You're
about
almost
flow
training
states.
yourself to ignore those things in favor of
Yeah,
internal, like,
yeah,
like you're focusing your attention inside your body or on cues in the environment that help you to make sure you're hitting the same pose each time, not actually hitting a
exactly.
moving target or reacting.
Yeah, exactly. And the more we work it, we find this internal external discussion is almost meaningless because
Yes.
we're moving in and in reference to everything that's going on around us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I find it very difficult these days now, a few years into this, where I can think of a good reason to isolate an action. I can put everything into some sort of game situation, some sort of simple. Um, let's start from here. It's different. Let's do something weird, but let's play. And
It's
then
funny because
suddenly,
my impression moving into this, like as soon as I was exposed to the constraints led approach and I started reading some of the material, I immediately was like, because we have some very complex maneuvers in wrestling and jujitsu that, there's many steps and they're effective. They work. We can't say like, oh, we just don't need to know how to do this. Like these are things that, despite being fairly complex, are effective, right? And I immediately was like, oh, that would be hard to constrain for, but it's possible. Like somebody can do it. Like Greg can do
yeah,
it. For some reason, for me, my initial impression was immediately, this is just a coaching skill issue. Like I started this yesterday. I've been information processing coaching for, 10 years. Like, let's give it like a couple of weeks before I start saying, oh, well, maybe CLA can't do this. You know what I mean? Like it just seemed, I was just like, oh, I need to learn more. And it's been true that as I get better with the constraints-led approach, that I'm able to solve some of these problems. Like, for example, foot sweeps was hard in the beginning, and now I feel very comfortable designing games and getting students to do that stuff.
yeah, yeah. And that's the challenge on the coach because I've got my diplomas and I've got all of the lists of all that stuff that I know, and it's still there. All of that stuff, it's still
Yeah,
there. It's just we've flipped the lens, we've flipped
yeah.
the telescope. We're now looking at it from context
Are there
and through function.
Are there like stereotypical problems in fencing that you always hear about when like because we have them in jujitsu, like one of them's the birimbolo. Like if you bring up CLA, they're like, well, how do you teach someone to birimbolo in CLA? Are there
Yeah,
things in fencing like that? I'd be curious to know what they are.
100%. So, and again, I do kind of upset a lot of people because there are hundreds and hundreds of moves. I mean,
Yeah.
there's in the achievement awards for the kids, there's 6 levels. There's about 20 actions in every level. They
Mm,
have to know in memory. Not a single skill. Only
yeah.
technical
Yeah. Okay.
acquisition stuff.
Actions.
Yeah. But and so I say, well, yeah, there are. There's 3 basic techniques in fencing. Only 3 techniques. You got to hit the other person first. You got to make them miss and hit them, and then take the blade or block them, parry them,
Yeah.
we would call, and hit them. And everything is a variation of that. So that's
Yeah.
your three basic ideas. And there are some um, very, very, very limited and therefore some fairly standard things, which of course I now understand to be just the system settling in. And, we've got some, a range of stability around common problems, as opposed to me trying to stabilize the action in a
Mm,
very particular way. And
yeah.
now
Yeah. Yeah.
when I watch that happen, I can see the players freak out. The locking and the freezing out of the shoulder as they do it the way the coach told them to do it, as opposed to just bam, just big problem we've got. And again, probably one of the reasons why all of this made so much sense to me early on is there's just no processing time. Zero processing time. I mean, I saw some figures on badminton where the smashes are coming in at 5 to 10 milliseconds. That's crazy. And we're
Yeah.
faster. It's
Yeah.
absolutely bonkers. And yet they see it. and they move and they adapt and they adjust and
Well, the
they
thing is, there's
in
so much information in the environment. Like, I get this with martial arts. People are like, how do you know that I was gonna punch? And it's like, well, you like moved the back of your head a little bit, and I'm attuned to that, and I see that you're shifting your weight and stuff, and I know that you're about to punch, or even subtle movements in people's faces or change in their breathing. There's just so much information there that can cue you to what the other person is doing. That I mean, honestly, like for me, sometimes it feels like I can hear what people are thinking. Like I know, like I'm like, oh yeah, they're gonna do this. Like, and how'd you know I was gonna? It was just obvious, and you can actually see this pretty clearly with kids. Like I had a kid, I was coaching her to try to grab the other kid's legs, and she was just looking at their legs and reaching, and you could see the intent being communicated so clearly just by the shape and position of the body. So, I think when you go from the information processing standpoint and you're like, there's a central governor and there's this little guy in your head, he's doing calculus. It's like there's no one would be able to even drive a car and it doesn't require those kinds of reflexes. Forget about, badminton. So it makes sense that that would be the point where the other worldview it just falls apart. How do you sustain that?
yeah, yeah. And I think most the decision making literature is coming around to this way of thinking about things. I mean, whether you call it ecological or you're getting into intuitive, and even with that, there's an assumption that there is a computer system sitting in the background somewhere and somebody's working out which action to choose at what time. And there's just so many variables,
Yeah.
degrees of freedom, even as something as simple as straightening the arm, inventing to
Yes.
hit somebody. There's 26 degrees of freedom in the arm, and you add another three from the shoulder, you're up
Yeah.
to over a billion possible. This is just at joint level. This is nothing with muscle and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
nerve,
totally.
you know, and that's before you move, and that's before you're sensing the other guy's intentions. So the variables are just too huge for the computer metaphor to work. It's had its time,
So I
but
think
it's
how you were saying before, you would teach things to your students and you'd be like, oh, I'm showing you this exactly the way that I do it, but it didn't translate. I feel like
yeah,
that has to do with that variability. I was watching a match with one of my students yesterday by someone who I've also had instruction from, and I watched him do exactly the thing that he says not to do in that position in
yeah,
order, and it was successful. Like he used
yeah,
the thing successful, and I was like, huh. It's the variability is just too high for us to dictate a movement pattern to a student and have it be good for anything.
yeah. Yeah, no, I've seen it happen too many times. 2015, 16, just before I started asking these kind of questions. And as I said, I did it because I took on responsibility for other coaches. I wasn't
Yeah,
doing it for myself, but I hadn't quite realized there was another way of looking at things. But I was at World Championships in Azerbaijan, and number one British guy, he's there in the pool stage, and he was a great athlete, unbelievable mover. His sense of timing was unbelievable. And he practices this. And anyway, we get there and he starts doing this move and it doesn't work. And he does it again and he does it again. There's three national coaches at the side going, mate, you gotta change, gotta change. He couldn't break out of the fact that this had worked for him for so
yeah,
long in
yeah,
a particular environment. And I had a
yeah,
couple of other coaches on this week with a
yeah,
very, very, very issue is that if you're preparing to move into a space where there's a lot of French and Italian and Hungarian operators who've been pretty much doing, you call it what you like, but they've been pretty much doing all of that technical training with the ecological information included in there. I mean, you go to an Italian camp, feel the distance. Don't worry about the technique. Feel the
yeah.
distance, sense, move, create, lend them the feeling of
And you're also saying the
the
training
countermove.
that they're feeding them with a realistic information in the training. So like instead of just having them do the technique in the air, there's someone in front of you stabbing at you, that type of stuff.
That's exactly right. So we, like a good coach friend of mine who wrote one of the book chapters, um, he saw it for the first time a few years ago, top Italian coach. And he said it was like abuse. The coach was in front of the kids, and the kids would never got to hit the coach.
Yeah.
Now we would stand there and allow the kid to hit and hit and hit and repeat all of the mechanical actions because we're trying to stabilize the action and we're trying to automate the action, yeah?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then the assumption being that's going to pop out at the right time, at the right place for the right reason in a year's time. And but he's watching this lesson and he's like, and he says to the coach afterwards, 40 minutes, I think the kid solved the problem like twice. And he said to the coach, you know, well, when do you teach the cart parry, a very, very bog standard technical action? And he just laughed. He just says, well, depends when the opponent's attack arrives. And so even there was no fixation on the biomechanical stuff like we do. This is on the feeling and perception of something arriving at an insane time. But the way that it's done with kind of movement, play, they even get the kids standing in the wrong feet. And I did it myself. We had some students come in, never fenced before. They'd never fenced before, and they came in to do a coach course. So they're going to do a multi-sport camps during the summer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we give them all the basic stuff, and we had some traditional coaches in there looking at me like I was crazy. This young woman, she had a sword in one hand, she had her feet the wrong way around, she was holding it like a club.
Yeah.
We just played, we just played, we just
Yeah.
played, we just played. 3 hours later, there was a young woman in there also doing the coaching course, but she made a last stay at the British under 20s championships this year. In
Wow.
3 hours, she couldn't touch this student who'd never fenced before.
Yeah.
It was incredible to watch.
Yeah.
Another one, we ran a course where the guy came in with boxing, taekwondo background,
Yeah.
so he could move, and
Yep.
we gave him the basics, and he was given a one-on-one lesson within half a day with the bronze medalist at the European Championships, top fencer, and he just starts moving, doing what we're saying: either hit him, take the blade and hit him, make him miss or hit them, do something different every time, do it differently every time. And then within 5 minutes, the kid who's the bronze medalist was going, yeah, okay. And he's a lovely kid. He's not arrogant, nothing bad about this. But he could, okay, it's fine. And then suddenly I said, right, let's move. And I go like, no, let's move. And this incredible fencer suddenly had to sit down, and he got one of the best workouts he's ever had in his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Highly challenging, highly variable. And I'm saying to myself, after what was it that I was so amazing about that experience? Not just the fact he'd never fenced before. It was so authentic because he didn't know what he was going to do next. And
Yeah.
the fencer did not know what was going to do next. So the actual exchange, it was weird, off the scale, nothing but very, 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 very functional.
It's very
And
interesting
this
because,
guy got value.
there's
Mm.
this phenomena of what we call like beginner's luck. And up until this conversation we're having just now, I never could figure out like, what is that, right? But it makes sense from an ecological perspective that somebody who's new at something with no preconceived notions of it, no mental models, they have no concepts going in, they're actually able to interact with the environment directly, especially when they're being cued and coached to do so, right? So you get somebody who's a solid learner and a solid mover. You give them a good, real, constraints-led approach coaching, and they don't have any preconceived notions. They can do really amazing because they're just like they're sort of clean relative to that activity.
Yeah.
So
We hear
fascinating.
it. No, it's fascinating. We hear it a lot. Oh, I hate fencing beginners. I can only fence good fencers. Of course, what they mean is they can only fence fencers who've had their actions stabilized
Yes.
in predictable ways like they have.
It's
when you're
very
up
challenging
against the
with
beginner.
fighting too. I have the same issue with jiu-jitsu as beginners. Their movement patterns are unpredictable. They haven't yet
Yeah.
been constrained and stabilized into those, typical conversations that we have in the sport. There's kind of like people fight the same battles all the time, almost
Yeah.
out of habit. So when beginners get in there and they start fighting you in a weird place or doing something that's not normally done, it's actually very disruptive to what you like to do.
Totally. And I used to see all of that as weakness, as noise, stuff
Yes.
to be trained out. And of course, it's not. It's the opposite. This is what you want because at top end in competition, it's difference that wins. If
Yeah.
everyone's doing the same, well, and you know what's happening and you know how to deal with it, where's your advantage? Where's the
Yeah.
ecological advantage in that? So, no, I've learned the one kid is actually another book chapter. It's a case. I've got three case studies: one in foil, one in epi, one in saber. And this kid, he'd been around the club for a couple of weeks, and he'd made one of the coaches cry because she just didn't. She's just, I don't know how to coach this kid. He will not take instruction.
Mm.
So I'm like, well, I've been reading all this stuff about games and constraints and what have you. So I'll have a go with him. And he just stood for a 10-year-old, hit me on the head as hard as you like. He clubbed me, right? His legs all over the place, the arms all over the place. And I was kind of like, okay, he won't take instruction. I already know that. That's good. I said, okay, that's 1-0 to me. And he goes, what? He goes, well, I'm not being funny, but, you know, if you put your knee over that way and your body over that way, you're going to end up in hospital. So, and I used that kind of Gabriella Wolf, external focus of attention. So I just said, don't care what you do, just make sure your shoe is pointing forward.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
all. That's all.
Yep.
Next hit, bam. Okay. Now I would have taken months over drilling and correcting and sorting out.
Yeah.
I
And
was
also,
expert in all that stuff.
realistically, like his motivation probably over those months would have not been great. I
Yeah.
just think you can easily lose a student in that type of situation where they're not taking instruction, as opposed to if you make it into a game, you can get really high levels of excitement and motivation, which is going to be correlated with learning and better movement.
Yeah, and what I know now is that if I'd taken the my old traditional route, I would probably have been de-skilling him as we progressed. So
Yeah.
next hit, again, bam. But I'm looking in the foot, ankle, knee, hip alignment. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I said, that's 2-0 to me. And they go, what are you talking about? I said, well, if you charge and lifting your hand, I'm just going to hit you here. I said it's easy for me. It's just like it's got to stop it, so I can hit you here. So I want you to make sure that you hit me with the pointy end. And he won
Mm.
this game 10-2. And he is a
Wow.
beginner. And in the next year, he does 9 of the GB events for his age group. He wins 6 of them. He medals in the other 3. He's a complete beginner. The year after that, he goes in, he wins Ghent, he gets third in Bucharest, bam, bam, bam. He then wins British Championships, he wins it again. And then when he's 15, he's taking out people that, and it's not, I'm
Yeah.
never that caught up with results. I never have been. It's I've never been that bothered with it. It's nice, don't get me wrong. And I've had a lot of success. I've trained over 100 British, Scottish, Commonwealth champions, okay? It's never really bothered me that much, but it's the quality of what was going on here. It was the
Yeah.
rate of the
Absolutely.
absorption and then the ability to go into Europe and compete at world level.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was quite, small, early days, small numbers. But I've been around for a long time, been coaching for 40 years here, and qualitatively, and then now it's being replicated, and we're thinking, okay, let's be cool about this, but we think we are on. So we've changed coach education in Scotland in one of the major UK coaching organisations. We've made the shift there. Coaching in clubs. One of the clubs who come and have really really applied themselves to the CLA. Very ordinary recreational community club. 2 years ago, they got their very first British champion, and they
Mm,
repeated it the year after, and then they're
yeah.
started going into Europe and doing well. So,
Wow.
and this has come from nothing. This has come. I say nothing. I'm being as respectfully as I mean that. This has come from a very ordinary, basic community club, and suddenly we're seeing quality, and we're seeing kids evolve, emerge, whatever you want to call it. They're
Yeah.
walking tall and they're holding their own at serious levels of competition.
Huh. Wow. So you feel like
Mm.
the overall that the shift as you brought this into the coaching education has been pretty successful so far, that you've been able to raise the level somewhat.
It feels that way, and the results are
Like starting.
suggesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that we kind of got, I would say, after COVID, about a year after COVID, we got to the starting line, and we were able then to distinguish, level one, two, three. How can we look at this rather than a stage kind of levels approach? We looked at it more of a kind of non-linear journey of expertise, and
Mm.
how do people learn and develop over time. And it's just the same with coaches it is with the fencer. You just create richer learning environments, you create bigger problems, you make it real,
Yeah.
and we just work on it together. I'll set up one or two live situations, and then after that, the guys are up and running on their own, and I'm jumping and I'm taking lessons from them. I'm not there instructing. We just become part of a big group all working through the issues, which is it's a great feeling.
What was like an issue or a problem or a challenge specifically when it comes to coaching in a constraints-led, approach, like what that you felt like was hard for you? It could have been, something that was early on, or was there something that you were like, man, this problem is just kicking my butt?
The language was the biggest problem, and I've actually spoken to
Mm.
Keith Davids and
Yeah.
Ian Renshaw and people about this, and I give them some strong feedback about this. The language is problematic,
Huh.
and when I write on my blog, I've really struggled with this over the years because it's a it's not that it's a difficult language. I mean, the language in fencing is unbelievable. You have to know the difference between your dérobement and your trompement and your, it's complex.
Yeah.
We're just very, very unfamiliar with the language, and we're unfamiliar with what it means. So what's happening now is that coaches are slowly changing their language, but they're not changing their meaning.
Mm.
So they're talking CLA speak.
But they're
But
still
of
being
course,
prescriptive.
because everything a coach does is a constraint,
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's a constraints-led approach.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yep. Yep.
because we use constraints ecologically to get an ecological effect, which is self-organizing around the constraints and the affordances in order that adaptation can emerge.
Yeah.
And the actions are properties of that environment, which is quite different to sprinkling a little bit of glitter here and a little bit of CLA language here to get them
Yeah.
to do that action the way that we've always done it. So that is, it's a frustration that I think it's just one I'm just having to breathe through at the moment. Just stay. I found over the years that the louder I banged the drum, the less people could hear what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
There is something about being okay with the time that it's going to take for the culture to shift, for meaning to come into the language that's being
Yeah.
used, and for people to
Totally.
go and experience what it is for themselves. You can't tell people what it is. You can't describe the taste of a strawberry to someone.
Yeah,
We have
totally.
to sit down, share a bowl of strawberries, and we've got a shared experience that we can discuss. If people aren't able to shake off their traditional training, their traditional language, traditional culture, and meaning, it's going to be a long haul. So it's going to be generational. And I think that's one of the reasons why I pushed that button on the book to be published, was
Yeah.
because it is part of influencing the environment, influencing the culture,
Yeah.
and it is having not insignificant effect, but it's frustrating. I think that there's going to be a long period of settling in.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating, like almost like CLA itself, right? Like if we let people experience the problem first,
Yeah,
and kind of struggle with certain things and chew on them and then kind of come in with maybe not a prescriptive solution, but advice on where to look, then
yeah.
people are a lot more receptive, rather than like you said, if you just bang the drum really loud. And I
Yeah.
think, like you said, the book is a great tool for that as well because it's something that you can kind of put it out there and then like it becomes a part of the environment and people who somebody's going to go to learn about fencing now and that book's going to come up and become, a part of their understanding, and that slowly chips away at the edifice of just this, old style approach. And not to toot my own horn, but kind of just like what I'm trying to do with this series on the podcast, which is to get a number of people who are involved in constraints-led approach in different sports and kind of pick their brains on these things. So I really appreciate you doing this. This was an awesome conversation. I very much appreciate you taking the time for it. And I encourage everybody to get a copy of your book and check it out. More and more in martial arts, people are circling back to sword fighting. So, it's something that's actually kind of coming back as a big part of the meta. People are really interested in machetes, Bowie knives, and that a lot of the technology and ways to use those goes back to fencing. So I think people
Well,
could
some of the feed
learn a lot.
some of the feedback I've had already is just take the word out, fencing out, and you can put in whichever sport that you like.
Absolutely.
It's a kind of 101. It's a here's my journey, here's my experience of it, and if there's stuff that's in here that can help, then I'm delighted. I've done my job.
Well, thanks again, man.
Absolute pleasure.